Hello everyone, Darkgeyser here, welcoming you to the relaunch of my Space Engineers YouTube channel. For those of you who are over 35 and survived a public school, you may remember my Space Engineers tutorial series from a couple of years ago. I had a number of YouTube Space Engineers tutorials as well as a series on how to build large scale ships in Space Engineers. For a variety of reasons, sadly, I was forced to close down that channel. However, all of those issues have now been resolved, and with the relaunch of Space Engineers out of early access, as well as their massive update to the survival mode of the game, I have decided to relaunch my Space Engineers survival channel. This is going to be the beginning of a short series of Space Engineers tutorials, which will then lead into a Space Engineers Let's Play. Now, as you can see, I am on the Earth-like planet, and even though we have low O2 there in the lower corner, you can see that I can open my helmet without dying, which is probably a good thing. I do apologize if the first few of these videos will seem a little bit dry for the more experienced players. I am planning on doing some more advanced things later on. However, the beginning of the series is geared mostly for beginning players, which is why we have decided to do the most basic start with the drop pod on the Earth-like planet. For the first couple of videos, I'm hoping to answer a few of the questions that I'm frequently seeing on the forums and that I've had a number of my friends and fellow players ask, and then we'll be getting into more of the Let's Play type of environment. Today's video is geared mostly around the idea of what do you get if you grind down the pod. Now, for those of you that might remember back in the day, quote unquote, when we first started Space Engineers and we had no planets, we started typically in a large, ugly yellow respawn ship, which was very compact, but it had basically everything you needed to get started, except for a tremendous amount of fuel. Uranium was a little scarce. Once we got planets and they got the planetary lander, that had such a huge amount of resources on it that it didn't really provide a lot of challenge. And that's one of the primary complaints for a lot of players from back then. Now with the drop pod, well, let's say the things have gotten a little more challenging. Now I've climbed back into my seat using the F key, basically whenever anything is highlighted in yellow. My F key is my default key. You can climb into the seat. With my I key, I'm activating the inventory for the passenger seat. One of the things that people keep doing in a lot of the videos that I'm seeing and a lot of the people on the forums, one of the first things they do is they start grinding down the pod, and they grind down the passenger seat, and they forget to remove the automatic rifle and the ammunition. Now, I have taken the liberty of turning off all of the random events, freighters and drones and wolves and even the unknown signals. And I plan on reactivating those later. But for now, I just wanted things to stay relatively clean and relatively easy to deal with. I didn't want a lot of confusion just getting started. Now, I'm going to hit my G key. I'm going to open my toolbar configuration or toolbar config. I have been playing Space Engineers for a number of years. I think I've got something like 3,000 hours in the game. And for some strange reason, I have always set my toolbar up the same way. I put in my welder, my grinder, and my drill on 7, 8, and 9. And then I do this for the first few hotbars, and that's primarily because you almost always need to weld or grind something, whether you're building something or what have you. So for the first 3 or 4 hotbars, I go ahead and I drop in all of that stuff, and then we go back, and I'm using the comma and period key to switch from one to the other. Comma moves everything to the left and period moves everything to the right. And then we use the light armor block. Now, anything with one of these plus signs on it basically has more than one block nested underneath it. You can see under the description there in the column to the right, light armor block. There are actually 6 blocks that are accessed through this icon. What happens is you go ahead and you put this thing on your hotbar, and then you scroll through it using your mouse wheel, and that gives you access to all of those various and sundry things. And the light armor block is one of the things that I normally will put, and for some reason that's not working. The light armor block is another one of those things that I normally will put several of, because you almost always seem to need one. Whether you're building a base or building a ship or whatever, you almost always seem to need one. So the first block that I have, typically the first few toolbars, is the light armor block. So now no matter what I'm doing, I've got a light armor block available. Now we're going to go to our grinder. We're taking a look at our drop pod here. This is a small block drop pod, and again, we have these are the large blocks, the large scale blocks. These are 2.5 meters on a side. These are the small scale blocks. These are 0.5 meter on the side. If you have an icon indicated like this, if you have something that's ghosted like this, and you put it up against something that has a block size, then it will automatically default to that block size. Unfortunately, at this time, we cannot simply connect large blocks to small blocks and vice versa without pulling some pretty shady shenanigans. So, for instance, if I have the large block and I mouse it over to the small block drop pod, then it automatically becomes a small block, because that's the only way that it could possibly be connected. And you simply switch from one to the other by clicking on the button repeatedly. So let's see what we have in this thing. We have our battery, which is very nearly full, which is good because it's the only source of power we're going to have. I believe that the sun is in the setting portion. You see the alien planet on the other side, and I think that's the moon. That's a nice collection there. We're going to screenshot that one. This is our survival kit. As you can see, there's nothing in it. And this is how you're going to be producing things. By the way, I have taken the liberty of putting things on the ×5 inventory size for both my suit and for the blocks. So I can carry 2,000 liters. The survival kit can hold 5,000 liters. That's a good compromise between the true survival, which everything is at ×1, and ×10, which, again, it gets to the point where there's no challenge. I did this largely for the idea of speeding things up for the videos. If you have everything at ×1 or ×3, you're just shuttle running things back and forth constantly. And to me, there is a fine line between challenge and tedium. And simply running the same thing over and over again, that's tedium. So we're going to go to our control panel. These are all of the things we have on our drop pod. Now, one of the things I want to do, our antenna's only set for 100 meters, which is fine. It's not consuming much power, 400 watts. Our battery will be completely depleted in 2 days. That's what I use as my timetable. If I don't have a base up and running in 2 days, I'm pretty much dead anyway. The beacon is currently broadcasting at 1,500 meters, and it doesn't look like it's going to be consuming any power anytime soon. Oh, it also doesn't look like it's on. Oops, 300 watts. We go back to the battery. That'll still last 2 days, so we're going to go ahead and leave that on. We have our landing gear. Landing gear defaults to auto lock, which is the only reason why my pod is sitting here instead of tumbling down the hill. Our ore detector, which I have been told the ore detectors actually use power. However, when you look down here in the details menu, you don't see anything. So I'm a little on the fence on whether the ore detector uses a measurable amount of power or not. The parachute hatch, which I'm going to be grinding down shortly, small cargo container, and the survival kit itself. So under normal circumstances, the first thing that a player would be doing is you would be digging up stone, which you then put in the survival kit. You go to your production tab, and under ingots, you can see where it says required and available there in the middle column. 500 stone is required in order to make anything. And for each quantity of 500 stone that you put in, you will get some gravel, some iron, some nickel, and some silicon. Those are the 4 basic food groups, as it were, although it's kind of silly because you don't use a lot of gravel, but you will get a relatively small amount. The iron, the nickel, and the silicon are what you're going to be starting with. Now, you can also produce basic tools, and these are the components that will be produced by the survival kit, and these will consume the ingots that you will be producing from here. So if I have put in a quantity of stone and I get 10 iron ingots, then I can come to here. And as you can see, computers don't consume a lot of resources. That's normally why if I queue up even some of them to be built, I'm going to queue up a lot of them. Construction components take a little over 2.5 iron ingots. Displays require a little bit, and so on and so forth. These are the only items that can be made out of the survival kit. It cannot make anything else. This is enough to get you started, but it will not produce enough things to build yourself a large vehicle or build yourself a large flying machine or to even build yourself a rocket to get off the ship, or to get off the planet, rather. For that, you need to upgrade your apparatus. And here is our O2H2 generator. And this contains an oxygen bottle, which I won't be using anytime soon, simply because I'm in an atmosphere, and therefore I can breathe. The hydrogen bottle, the hydrogen is what is consumed by your jetpack when you're jetting around, and you have 300 kilograms of ice. I'm not going to be jetting around much, and I don't want to carry the thing because they are very heavy. 120 liters out of 2,000 liters, that's heavier than I want right now. I'd rather keep myself relatively footloose and fancy-free with regards to carrying things. So let's get down to brass tacks. I wanted to demonstrate what you can get if you grind down your pod. And as I said, when the game first launched, no one thought anything. It was a typical start, actually, to have the ugly yellow respawn ship and to simply grind the ship up or grind off parts of it for material that you would then use to improve whatever was left of the ship. And that was how you got started. And if you were in a rough spot where you didn't have a lot of resources to mine, particularly uranium, things could get a little dicey. Now I'm cutting all of this extra light armor off because it's largely cosmetic. And one of the reasons that I'm approaching the blocks from the side is because with light armor blocks, particularly small blocks, it's relatively easy for you to be grinding on something, and then accidentally, you can see that I've already ground a little bit of this one by accident. Now, I'm eventually going to wind up coming back and grinding that away anyway. But it's very easy to grind all the way through a block and then grind too much on the block behind it. So when I'm first starting out and I don't want to accidentally grind away something behind something else, then I will try to come in at an angle so that if the block that I'm grinding on suddenly disappears, then I'm not accidentally overflowing onto something that I want to keep. And as you can see, my inventory is already about half full. Maybe a little more. The hitboxes on the very small corners are very small. Those are sometimes easier to get when they're fastened to something. You will see a lot of YouTubers that when they're in the process of grinding down small blocks, they may wind up chasing those corners across the ground, attempting to reach them and attempting to find the hitboxes so they can grind them down. So far I haven't ground off anything of any real importance, just a bunch of armor block. And as you can see, that amounts to 74 steel plates. I've got quite a bit of construction components. I also took the motors, which is 4 large steel tubes, 4 metal grid, and a bunch of motors. Atmospheric thrusters take a lot of motors, so just for your information. Now, I'm getting to the point where I'm over half full, and I don't want to be dragging all this stuff around with me. So I'm going to go to the survival kit, and I'm going to put as much of this stuff in it as I can. The survival kit will not hold anything that it cannot produce, and it will not make large steel tubes, it will not make metal grids, it won't make the ammunition, and it won't make the automatic rifles. So I'm double clicking on these things to try to get them to transfer, and they're not. Now I want to increase my storage capacity a little bit. I'm going to take out this light armored slope here, which is cosmetic. I want to be able to store more stuff. I don't want to have to carry everything around with me. So since I have taken the rifle out of the seat, we're going to grind off a few things here. And until you've done this a number of times, you want to be careful because different things are connected by different points. This light armor block, you can see it will not go in there because this space is occupied by the hitbox of another block. And I can fasten it here because I'm fastening it to a flat surface. You cannot fasten it to a slope. But you can see the small red box behind where the light armor block is. Were I able to place it, that's the block that it would be connected to. If I ground away that block, then this armor block would simply fall off. So we can do that. We grind that off and our block falls away. So when you are grinding on things that you yourself have not built, you have to be careful because you're not sure how it's constructed. You're not entirely sure what has been fastened to what. I cannot tell you how many times I have been grinding on a ship that I have captured or something that someone else has built. Now see, this seat was attached back here, and this landing gear was attached to the seat. I can't tell you how many times I've been grinding on something, and it was not something of my design. And so, as a result, the thing I ground away at a cargo container or some other centrally located thing, and the whole thing started to come apart because everything was attached to the thing that I had ground away. I'm getting rid of a few of these things. These are small conveyors designed primarily to attach different ports and different pieces of equipment. We have the small cargo container here, which has nothing in it. And since I'm here grinding things, I also want to try to unlock some of the things from the tech tree. So I ground the small cargo container down, and then I started to weld it back up again. So that basically counts as having built it. I'm going to be building a couple of them anyway in a minute, so that was kind of a moot point, but it was just for demonstration. Now, I have 2 landing gear. The green lights indicate that those are locked. The blue indicates that it is not, although it is in range of being locked. So again, I'm going to grind this down, and we're going to weld that back up, and then we're just going to go ahead and finish grinding it because I want the components. And if we go to our toolbar config again, we click on progression, and this shows the tech tree and how things are unlocked. It defaults automatically to the top. You have the basic assembler, and if you mouse over something that is not yet unlocked, it will tell you what you need to build in order to unlock that particular item. So we have the basic assembler, we have light armor blocks, which I have not built any. I've only been grinding them, so I haven't unlocked any of these things. An interior wall, which I'll be building in a minute, just so that I can unlock this stuff. The basic refinery unlocks a lot of things. The landing gear that I just ground away and then welded back up has unlocked a lot of components that I'm going to be using relatively quickly primarily the wheels and cockpits and so forth. The O2H2 generator will unlock a cryo chamber, an air vent, an oxygen tank, none of which I need anytime soon, so I'm not going to be doing that. It will also unlock the hydrogen engine, which we'll get into later, a hydrogen tank, and large and small hydrogen thrusters. I have unlocked the the small cargo container, which I believe all of the cargo containers default at open. And so now I've unlocked all of this stuff. Have to build a small conveyor or one of these other items to unlock the rest of this. Then we have our wind turbine and our solar panel, which is how we get power initially other than our battery. And that unlocks quite a bit of stuff as well. However, you need to make some items in order to get these to work. You don't start with, you can see on the list to the right that you need a certain amount of interior plates, motors, construction components, girders, and computers. You don't start with enough of any of this stuff to do anything. So you're grinding on these things, and none of the things that I'm grinding on yet give you girders. None of them require girders to build, and so grinding them doesn't give you any of the components back. You need to actually make the 24 girders out of the survival kit. So we will be doing a little bit of mining. Crouching, uncrouching. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to leave the lights on because the lights are only 2 construction components apiece. And since the sun has already gone down, I'm going to need the light. Yep, we've got a couple of nice alien planets. I believe that's the moon around that planet. I'm not sure about the moon around this planet. Interesting. One of the things that you can do when you set yourself a challenge, and as a sandbox game, Space Engineers is one of those things where you have to make your own, you pretty much have to make your own challenges in a lot of cases. Starting out on an Earth-like planet and then trying to escape the planet and get to another planet is one of the more exciting challenges that you can set for yourself, particularly because once you leave an Earth-like planet, you often have to worry about pressurization, oxygen, so on and so forth. And believe me, being in space is a lot more challenging than running around someplace where the temperature is warm, as it is now, and the oxygen is flowing freely. So we're going to put as many of these things in here as we can. As you see, we cannot store the small steel tubes, the metal grids, or the large steel tubes because we cannot produce any of those things. However, and I do have to remember to take some of this stuff back, one of the things I want to do to help myself with my cargo problem, we're going to go to our gconfig and we're going to get a small cargo container. And we just ground one of these down, so now we know how to build it. And we're going to build a couple of these. And fortunately, we have all of the material that we need. This one, we do not have the display, but as long as you can weld it above the functional line, then that means it will still work. If I have the display, then I can complete it, but it's 83% complete and it will actually function, so that's good enough for me. Now I'm going to open this thing and I'm going to store some of the items that I cannot store anywhere else. And as you can see, now my volume that I'm carrying on my personal inventory has gone down significantly, and I can store things like heavy metal grids and large steel tubes, which take up quite a bit of space in my inventory. So now I'm not carrying so much junk. And we come around to the survival kit and we can store everything else. So now I'm carrying only 53 liters out of 2,000 liters. So I'm practically empty, and that means I can carry a lot more stuff. So now we're going to turn on our headlamp, and then we're going to grab our drill. When you're first getting started, mining is going to be a part of the game. There's not really any way to get around it, and that's fine. I mean, it's a resource management game, which means you have to start with some resources. So I'm going to be standing here on this the grassy knoll Some of you may get that reference. And I'm going to start left-click mining, which, because I'm not close enough... Oh, I actually did get a rock out of there. But because I'm not close enough, I'm not getting a lot of material, so I'm going to crouch with the C button, and that's going to enable me to start mining. It puts me closer to the material. You have left-hand click mining, or left mouse button, which will give you material that you can then subsequently collect. And as you can see, I just picked up 111 stone. You also have right-click mining, where you are digging a bigger hole. As you can see, I just made a much bigger hole with that than I did the other way. But you don't get anything to pick up. You're basically destroying the material. Now, the main reason I'm doing this is because while you're digging through this dirt-like substance or grass, you're going to be getting these very small... This one's only worth 8. That's 50, and it's somewhat random. That one's only 3, so I would be here all day trying to accumulate 2,000 liters worth of material. But once you get through the grass and the sand, and you get down to the actual stone, now that one's a lighter color, so it's 39. That one is 148. So once you get into the actual stone color and stone texture, now each nugget is worth more. And of course I can just wave this around, and I'm going to be getting some of the good quality stuff, and I'm going to be getting some of the junk, but it's what I got. I recommend that you dig in a circle, especially when you're first getting started, with the middle part being the lowest point so that the stone just accumulates. And then I'm going to just hit my F key a lot to collect everything. And you can hold down your F key if you're more dexterous than I am. And you can actually accumulate some of this while you're drilling. One of the reasons why, unfortunately, I was forced to cancel my earlier channel, I had some health issues, and I have, as a result, wound up with some nerve damage. And sadly, my hand-to-eye dexterity, which was never very good, is now absolutely terrible, which is one of the reasons why you will never see me playing a first-person shooter, because I would simply get shot. So, now you get an inventory full notice, so now it's time for me to get out of here, and as you can see, I've managed to land myself in a hole by digging straight down. There's my respawn pod. It's 17 meters away. Now, instead of wasting... because I don't have any ice nearby, instead of wasting a bunch of hydrogen jetpacking out of here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tilt at a slightly upward angle, and I'm going to walk forward, and I'm going to be right-clicking on the mouse. So I'm basically digging myself a tunnel. And again, this is the right-click, so I'm actually destroying the material, so I'm not winding up. I'm already full, so I can't carry any more. And I basically make myself a sloping tunnel that I can walk out of. And that's our generator, which means we're going around to here. Now we're going to double-click on the stone. That transfers all of the stone, and it's 5,250 kilograms, so almost 2,000 liters. We're going to go to production, and we're going to queue up 100 ingots, and each time that cycles through, it takes 500, and it makes some gravel, and some iron, and some nickel, and some silicon. In diminishing amounts, it makes more iron than anything else, because that's what we use more than anything else. And when it gets to the point where there is less than 500, and as you can see, it's down to 262. When it's less than 500 stone in the machine, it stops. So what we are going to do, and I am very fortunate because I'm navigationally challenged. I'm very fortunate that I happen to have a tree right next to my my stone mine, as it were. So now I can find things a little easier, even in the dark. And our inventory is full again, so we're running back up here. And now I'm getting an energy low warning. So now we come around to here. And we highlight the yellow bit on the survival kit. And for me, my default key is the F key for accessing things and interacting with things. Now, something else that you can do when you have unlocked it, and we've already unlocked the passenger seat, something else that you can do is you can go ahead and take the passenger seat, put it back on the pod, and you can just sit down in the passenger seat, and that will also recharge your power. I believe it recharges at about the same rate as just clicking on the window, but whether or not you decide to do that is entirely up to you. I will sometimes do it that way simply because if I'm going to step away from the keyboard for a minute and my suit power is very low, sometimes what I will do is I will simply sit down in the seat and then I will get up and go away from the keyboard while my suit is charging, particularly if I'm in an atmosphere and I don't have to worry about running out of oxygen while I'm sitting there and suffocating. You can see that there's a variety of different colors of stone, which makes things a little bit interesting visually. I think that was a good change. It was a relatively small change on the part of the developers, not like changing the color of the stone was going to be something that took a lot of resources or a lot of time to do. But it is kind of nice not to have to look at the same featureless stone all the time. So we're still working on grinding the pod. Now that I have some stone going, and as I said before, I have some amount of experience in this. I've actually ground down probably close to a dozen of these things already. We have this corner light, so I want to make sure that I don't lose that somehow. And I wanted to get as much of this ground down as I could before I actually manufactured anything, just so that you would get a clear idea of everything that you start with before you start the manufacturing process. And as you can see, just regular steel plate, and that's all I'm going to have in my inventory. I have the four construction components from the two lights. Basic components like steel plates and construction components and so forth don't take up a lot of your inventory. As you can see, I've been grinding on this thing for a while now, and you can see the red box underneath or around what's going on there. So that is an indicator of what I'm going to be grinding. And that's sometimes hard to spot depending on what your visual settings are at or what the environment is like. Fortunately, this particular twilight or nighttime situation, and I realize here I have a beacon which is probably attached to this block, so I did not want that to fall. I'm also going to take out the timing block. Now see, I've accidentally managed to cut down a little bit of the survival kit. Wave this around and make sure I didn't cut down anything else by accident. And now, again, we're going to come around here. We have some components that won't fit. And these components, at the radio communication components, that's 280 liters a piece. So, I'm sorry, that's not 280 a piece. That's a grand total of 280 because my total volume is 335. However, I still don't want to be dragging them around with me, and so therefore I'm going to go ahead and put those in the small cargo container. For those of you that are not very familiar with the game, you will notice that we have the large ports on some of the equipment. We have the small ports on other items. If you are directly accessing a small port, particularly with a cargo container, then you can pass any item into or out of the port. And the antenna is another one of those things where we have some fairly large components. The radio communication components are quite heavy. And again, we cannot store those in the survival kit. And the fact that I cannot get any more components into the other cargo container is one of the reasons why I built a second one. I happen to know from experience, through a lot of trial and error and false starts, I happen to know that I can't fit both of those components into a single cargo container. So now we're going to come over here. Now we don't want to grind away all the stuff on the bottom because we want to make sure that the different components, the O2H2 generator and the survival kit and this battery, we want to make sure that they are all still connected by armor plate continuously, since that's how power is conducted through the various components. Now my suit energy is low, so we come back over to here. I'm pretty sure that sitting in the passenger seat recharges this faster, but we'll have to run a test. And I don't think I'm going to be able to get to that from down here, so I am going to have to jetpack up. Okay. Break my own rule. Okay, everything's still intact over there. Now I'm going to go ahead and risk it, and I'm going to go ahead and grind up, just for the sake of completeness, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that landing gear. So now we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We have somewhere in the vicinity of a dozen or 16 armor blocks that are still underneath, holding everything together, as well as 2 steel plates, 5 construction components, and 1 motor in the last landing gear. We have the O2H2 generator, which we're not going to be grinding down anytime soon, simply because we need it for the hydrogen. But as you can see, it has a few components there, including large steel tubes, which we, as I said, they're very heavy, and I don't believe we can currently make those. Then we have our battery, which has 20 power cells in it, which those are also quite heavy, and we also cannot manufacture those right now. Go to our production just to answer that question. Nope, cannot make large steel tubes. We also cannot make metal grid. So let me see if I have enough room in my inventory to hold all of this. Yeah, just barely. So to answer the question of how much stuff you get out of your drop pod, if you grind it down to the point where all you have left is the battery, the O2H2 generator, and your survival kit, as well as a couple of small cargo containers to hold a couple of extra items, and a dozen or 16 or so blocks to bolt everything together, and one landing gear, what you wind up with, you probably would be in excess, if you ground everything down, you would be in excess of 200 steel plates. You'd have 80 motors, about 160 or 180 construction components, 25 or 30 interior plates, 4 computers, 3 small tubes, 6 large steel tubes, and a detector component, as well as 5 radio communications components. 8 radio communications components, a rifle, 90 rounds of ammunition, and 8 metal grids. So if you want to sit down with the wiki and figure out exactly what all you can build with that, you go right ahead. I know for a fact that I cannot build all of the things that I want in order to get started, which means that there's going to be some mining before we go ahead and start the base. But that's going to be for the second video. So that's going to be it for now. I have accomplished my goal of grinding off everything that I don't need, as well as mining a little bit, and so now I have a small amount of resources to get started. On the next episode, I'm going to start my base, which I plan to do a couple of different things. I have a couple of not unique ideas. I'm sure someone else has come up with it, but I haven't seen them do it on YouTube yet, so I hope to be the first. I'm going to go ahead and build a starter base, and then once I have the starter base up and running, then I'm going to start building a mobile base, and I plan on, by the 4th or 5th episode, I plan on just going total Mortal Engine on the thing, grinding up the entire base, putting the whole thing on wheels on a large crawler type of vehicle, and then I'm going to set out from there. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope that I will see you again for the next episode. As always, likes are appreciated and subscriptions doubly so. This is Darkizer signing off. Thank you for watching.